You will now hear the Honorable Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Good evening, my friends. Although I understand that I am talking under the auspices of the Democratic National Committee, I do not want to limit myself to politics. I do not want to feel that I am addressing an audience of Democrats, nor that I am speaking merely as a Democrat myself. For the present condition of our national affairs is too serious to be viewed through partisan eyes for partisan purposes. 15 years ago, my public duty called me to an active part in a great national emergency, the World War. Success at that time was due primarily to a leadership whose vision extended beyond the timorous and futile gesture of sending a tiny army of 150,000 trained soldiers and the regular Navy over to Europe to the aid of the Allies. The generalship, the leadership of that moment in 1917 conceived of a whole nation mobilized for war. Economic, industrial, social, and military resources gathered into a vast unit capable of and actually in the process of throwing into the scales 10 million men, equipped with physical needs and sustained by the realization that behind them were the united efforts of 110 million human beings. It was a great plan because it was built from the bottom to the top and not from the top to the bottom. It was national in the best sense of the word. In my judgment, my friends, my calm judgment, the nation faces today a more grave emergency than in 1917. It has been said that Napoleon lost the Battle of Waterloo because he forgot his infantry. He staked too much on the more spectacular but less substantial cavalry. The present administration in Washington provides, I think, a close parallel. It has either forgotten or it does not want to remember the infantry of our economic army. These unhappy times call for the building up of plans that rest upon the forgotten, the unorganized, but the indispensable units of economic power. For plans like those of 1917 that build from the bottom up and not from the top down, that put their faith once more in the forgotten man at the bottom of the economic pyramid. Obviously, these few minutes tonight permit me no opportunity to lay down the 10 or a dozen closely related objectives of a plan to meet our present emergency, but I can draw a few of the essentials, a beginning, in fact, of a planned program. It is the habit of some unthinking people to turn in times like this to the illusions of economic magic. People suggest that a huge expenditure of public funds by the federal government, by state government, and by local government will completely solve the unemployment problem. But it is clear that even if we could raise many billions of dollars and find definitely useful public works to spend these billions on, even all that money would not give employment to the 7 million or the 10 million people who are today out of work. Let us admit frankly that it would be only a stopgap. And a real economic cure must go to the killing of the bacteria in the system rather than to the treatment of mere external symptoms. How much do the shallow thinkers realize, for example, that approximately 1/2 of our whole population, 50 or 60 million people, are earning their living by farming or in small towns whose existence immediately depends on farms? They have today lost their purchasing power. Why? Because they're receiving for farm products less than the cost to them of growing those farm products. The result of that loss of purchasing power is that many other millions of people engaged in industry in the cities cannot sell industrial products to the farming half of the nation. That brings home to every city worker the fact that his own employment is directly tied up with the farmer's dollar. No nation can long endure half bankrupt. Main Street, Broadway, the mills, the mines will close if half the buyers are broke. I cannot escape the conclusion that one of the essential parts of a national program of restoration must be to restore purchasing power to the farming half of the country. Without this, the wheels of the railroad and the wheels of the factories will not turn. Closely associated with this first objective is the problem of keeping the homeowner and the farm owner where he is without being dispossessed through the foreclosure of his mortgage. His relationship to the great banks of Chicago and New York is, frankly, quite remote. The $2 billion fund which President Hoover and the Congress have put at the disposal of the big banks, the railroads, and the national corporations is not for him. His is a relationship to his little local bank, his little local loan company. And it's a sad fact that even though the local lender in many cases doesn't want to evict the farmer or the homeowner by foreclosure proceedings, he is forced to do that in order to keep his bank or his company solvent. Here should be an objective of government itself to provide at least as much assistance to the little fellow as it is now giving to the large banks and corporations. That is another example of building from the bottom up. One other objective closely related to the problem of selling American products is to provide a tariff policy based on economic common sense rather than on politics, hot air, and pull. This country during the past few years, culminating with the Hawley-Smoot tariff of 1929, has compelled the world to build tariff fences so high that world trade is decreasing to the vanishing point. The value of goods internationally exchanged is today less than half of what it was just 3 or 4 years ago. Every man and woman who gives any thought to the subject knows that if our factories run even 80% of capacity, they will turn out more products than we as a nation can possibly use ourselves. The answer is that if they are to run on 80% of capacity, we must sell some of the goods abroad. How can we do that if the outside nations cannot pay us in cash? And we know by sad experience that they cannot do that. The only way they can pay us is in their own goods or raw materials. But this foolish tariff of ours makes that impossible. What we must do is this: to revise our tariff on the basis of a reciprocal exchange of goods, allowing other nations to buy and to pay for our goods by sending us such of their goods as will not seriously throw any of our industries out of balance, and incidentally, making impossible in this country the continuance of pure monopolies that cause us to pay excessive prices for many of the necessities of life. Such objectives, my friends, as these three, restoring the farmer's buying power, relief to the small banks and homeowners, and a reconstructed tariff policy, these are only a part of 10 or a dozen vital factors. But they seem to be beyond the concern of a national administration that can think in terms only of the top of the social and economic structure. They have sought temporary relief from the top down rather than permanent relief from the bottom up. They have failed totally to plan ahead in a comprehensive way. They have waited until something has cracked, and then at the last moment have sought to prevent a total collapse. It is high time to get back to fundamentals. It is high time to admit with courage that we are in the midst of an emergency at least equal to that of war. Let us mobilize to meet it.